London, 1758. A woman sits in front of a mirror. She's 25, but she looks like she's been ill for a decade. Her skin is grey, her gums are swollen, her hands shake. She picks up a small porcelain jar, dips a brush into a thick white paste, and begins applying it to her face. The paste is called Venetian ceruse. It's made of white lead and vinegar. She knows it burns. She knows that every time she peels it off, her skin underneath looks worse than before, rawer, redder, more damaged. And she knows that the only way to cover up the damage is to apply more. Her name is Maria Gunning, the Countess of Coventry, one of the most celebrated beauties in Georgian England. Crowds gathered in the streets when she walked by. She was painted by the finest portraitists of the era. She dined with the king. When George II asked what royal spectacle she'd most like to see, she told him, "A royal funeral." He laughed. Everyone laughed. She was that beautiful. She could say anything. Her husband, the Earl, hated the makeup. There's a story, widely told at the time, of him chasing her around the dinner table with a napkin, trying to wipe the lead off her face. She fought him off. She kept applying. 2 years later, Maria Gunning was dead. She was 27. There is a version of this story people like to tell. Beautiful woman, vain woman, poisoned by her own vanity. But here's what that version never asks. Why couldn't she stop? Maria Gunning was not unusual. She was typical. In 18th century England, white lead cosmetics were everywhere. Women across the social spectrum used them. Aristocrats, actresses, merchants' wives. And not because they didn't understand the risk. There were pamphlets warning about the dangers of ceruse. Doctors wrote about it. Satirists mocked it. Everyone knew. And yet the practice continued for over 200 years. To understand why, you need to understand the moment. This was mid-18th century England, a period of extraordinary social fluidity. The old aristocratic order was fraying, wealth was becoming mobile, new money was flooding in from trade, from the colonies, from industry. The newly rich needed to look aristocratic. The old aristocracy needed to prove they still were. In this world, a woman's face was not her face. It was her family's social currency. A pale, smooth, luminous complexion said, "I do not work in the sun. I am not poor. I am not sick. I am not loose. I am worth investing in." Maria Gunning was born into a family with aristocratic blood, but no money. Her parents were broke. They literally sent their daughters into acting, a profession considered barely above prostitution, because they had nothing else. Maria's only asset was her beauty, and she leveraged it. By 20, she'd married an earl. By 22, she was the most famous woman in London. So when she sat in front of that mirror and applied a substance she knew was destroying her, that wasn't vanity. That was economic survival. She was maintaining the only infrastructure she had. And this is where the story stops being about makeup. Here's how beauty standards become social control. It's a three-part mechanism. And once you see it, you'll see it everywhere. Part 1. Link appearance to moral worth. This is the foundational move. It's not enough for beauty to be admired. It has to mean something. In Georgian England, a clear complexion meant virtue. In Song Dynasty China, small feet meant obedience. In 1950s America, a particular kind of slenderness meant discipline and self-control. The specific ideal doesn't matter. What matters is the equation. If you look right, you are right. Once that link is established, the standard stops being aesthetic. It becomes ethical. Failing to meet it isn't just unattractive, it's a character flaw. And that shift is everything. Because you can argue with a fashion trend. You can't argue with a moral judgment. Part 2. Make compliance painful, but possible. This is the key. The standard has to be achievable, but only through suffering. Foot binding worked not because it was easy, but because it was hard. Any family could bind a daughter's feet. But the process took years. Broken bones, a small girl crying while her mother tightened the bandages. The suffering was the point. It proved commitment. It proved you were the kind of family that would sacrifice for propriety. Lead makeup worked the same way. Ceruse didn't just cover the skin, no, it actively damaged it, creating the very blemishes it was meant to hide. So the woman needed more ceruse to cover the damage the ceruse had caused. This is not a side effect. This is the architecture, a dependency loop. And dependency loops are one of the most reliable control systems humans have ever built, because the subject controls herself. Victorian corsets ran on the same logic. The tighter the corset, the more fragile the woman appeared. Doctors wrote reports about collapsed lungs, deformed ribs, women fainting in the street. But the corsets didn't disappear. They became tighter. Because the discomfort was never a flaw in the system. It was proof that the system was working. Pain was rebranded as discipline. The body became a project, not something you live in, but something you correct. Part 3. Make opting out more expensive than opting in. This is where it locks. In Song Dynasty China, a girl with unbound feet could not marry well. In many regions, she could barely marry at all. Her family lost social standing. She lost economic security. The pain of binding was terrible, but the pain of not binding was worse. Not because anyone held a weapon to your head, but because the entire structure of opportunity had been built around compliance. No one had to enforce it directly. There were no police officers checking waist measurements, no Ministry of Beauty. The system ran on something far more efficient: attention, marriage prospects, status. If a woman followed the code, doors opened. If she didn't, something subtler happened. She was ignored. And humans are extremely sensitive to that. Eventually, the rule moves inside the head. Women competed over waist size. Fashion magazines celebrated the most extreme silhouettes. Corset advertisements promised elegance, virtue, refinement. And once that mindset exists, society barely needs to push anymore. People do the pushing themselves. And at that point, something strange happens. Control becomes invisible. There is no tyrant, no law, no command. Only millions of small private decisions that all move in the same direction. Tighten the corset a little more. Apply another layer. Smooth the skin. Shrink the waist. No one ordered it, but everyone understands the rule. When a practice becomes widespread enough, it stops looking like a practice. It starts looking like nature. If every woman you know has bound feet, then bound feet aren't modified, they're normal. If every face is covered in white lead, then a bare face isn't natural, it's neglected. The standard becomes invisible precisely because it's universal. And once it's invisible, questioning it feels insane. You're not pushing back against a system. You're pushing back against reality. That's what happened to Maria Gunning. That's what happened to millions of women with lotus feet. They were not ignorant. They were rational. Inside an irrational system that had made itself look like the only world there was. Seoul, 2019. A 16-year-old girl receives a high school graduation gift. It's not a laptop. It's not a trip. It's double eyelid surgery. The procedure takes about an hour. Recovery takes a week or two. Her parents paid for it. Her friends got the same thing. One of them tells a journalist, "When you're 19, all the girls get plastic surgery, so if you don't do it, after a few years, your friends will all look better." South Korea has the highest rate of cosmetic procedures per capita in the world. Around 1 in 3 women between 19 and 29 report having had some form of plastic surgery. In the Gangnam district of Seoul, there are 400 to 500 cosmetic surgery clinics in a single square mile. The easy version of this story sounds like judgment. Look at these people. How shallow. How conformist. But let's apply the mechanism. Step 1. Appearance is linked to moral worth. In South Korea, managing your appearance isn't superficial. It's a signal that you're diligent, self-respecting, socially competent. A Stanford researcher described cosmetic surgery as a strange elective necessity, something that signals you're the kind of person who takes care of themselves. Not doing it can read as carelessness. Step 2. Compliance is painful, but possible. Surgery hurts. It costs money. It carries real risk. There have been documented deaths from unlicensed operations by so-called ghost doctors. But the suffering, the expense, the risk, these don't discourage participation. They validate it. You sacrificed for this. That proves you're serious. Step 3. Opting out is more expensive than opting in. Companies routinely require a photo on job applications. Over 90% of South Korean women in one survey expected to face appearance-based discrimination at interviews. Dating agencies reportedly turn away applicants who don't meet appearance thresholds. After the financial crisis of 1997, when unemployment surged and competition became brutal, cosmetic surgery rates climbed sharply. People didn't suddenly become more vain. The stakes got higher. When there are fewer seats at the table, you do more to make sure you're sitting in one. 300 years. Different tools. Same architecture. But the mirror doesn't stop there. It gets closer. Around 2020, plastic surgeons in London started noticing something strange. Young patients were coming to consultations with a reference photo, not of celebrities, of themselves, but filtered, smoother skin, sharper jaw, larger eyes. They didn't want to look like someone else, they wanted to look like their edited version. Surgeons started calling it Snapchat dysmorphia. Face filters were designed as toys, dog ears, funny hats. But the most popular ones did something else. They quietly adjusted proportions. Nose slightly smaller, skin slightly smoother, eyes slightly larger. Subtle enough that it didn't feel artificial. Just better. And after seeing that version of yourself hundreds of times a day, the unfiltered face starts to look wrong. No government passed a law, no authority ordered it, but millions of people began correcting their faces to match an image that never existed. The Dependency Loop, updated for the 21st century. The filter creates the standard. The standard creates the dissatisfaction. The dissatisfaction drives you back to the filter. Maria Gunning applied white lead to cover the damage that white lead had caused. A teenager applies a filter, feels temporarily relieved, and then can't bear the unfiltered version. The substance changes. The mechanism is identical. So here's the reversal. The problem was never beauty. Beauty is human. The desire to adorn, to transform, to present yourself, that's as old as ochre on cave walls. There's nothing inherently oppressive about wanting to look a certain way. The problem was never even the standard itself. Standards shift. Pale skin, dark skin, thin, curved, tall, small. These rotate through cultures like seasons. No single ideal holds power on its own. Beauty itself was never the trap. The trap was the price of refusing it. The problem was the cost of disobedience. The moment a beauty standard is welded to economic access, to social legitimacy, to moral standing, the moment not conforming becomes not just unfashionable but dangerous. Beauty becomes something else entirely. A sorting mechanism, a loyalty test dressed as a lipstick shade, a cage the prisoner builds herself and then defends, because the cage is the only structure she's been given. Maria Gunning didn't die of vanity. She died of a system that made her appearance the only capital she had, and then sold her the poison to maintain it. When a society feels unstable, it starts looking for signals of order, and the human body is the easiest surface to write those signals on. Beauty standards don't appear most aggressively when people feel free. They appear most aggressively during periods of uncertainty. They define who belongs, who behaves correctly, who understands the rules. Beauty stops being about looking good and starts being about looking acceptable. We tell Maria's story as a warning about cosmetics. It's actually a warning about economies of worth. In 2018, a movement began in South Korea. Women filmed themselves smashing makeup palettes with hammers, pouring foundation down the drain, cutting their hair short on camera. They called it Escape the Corset. Not escape beauty. Escape the corset. Because the thing that constrains you is never the desire to be beautiful. It's the thing that tightens around you when you try to stop. Every generation believes it has finally escaped the strange customs of the past. The corsets are gone, the foot bindings are gone, the lead paint is gone. But the mirror remains. And the question it asks hasn't changed very much. Not, do you like how you look? But something quieter. Are you shaped the way this moment in history expects you to be?